Usually when we talk about a computer getting a virus, there's this expectation of a really clear immediate alert.
Right, like a big red screen or something.
Exactly. A big red screen pops up on your monitor, an alarm sounds, and your antivirus software just points to a specific file and says, there it is. Threat detected. Quarantine recommended. It's incredibly unambiguous.
It's totally binary. Yeah. Safe or infected. I mean, the logic of a machine is clean and, those boundaries are just really well defined.
And it's comforting. We like things to be visible, to be categorized, and most importantly, we like having a system running in the background that, protects us from bad code without us having to manually inspect every single line of data that comes through our router. We really rely on that layer of defense.
Oh, absolutely. But then you step away from the keyboard, right? And into the real world. You step into the landscape of, human communication, media consumption, and just daily debate. And suddenly, that background antivirus software, it just doesn't exist. We are navigating this daily, torrential flood of information that is, honestly, it's incredibly murky.
So murky.
You're processing thousands of claims, arguments, and persuasive tactics every single day. And your brain is the only firewall you actually have.
It is the absolute definition of a post-truth muddy water situation. So if you're listening to this right now, welcome to today's Deep Dive.
Glad to have you here.
Our mission today is explicitly for you. We want to help you navigate this modern ecosystem where, echo chambers, biased media, and highly sophisticated manipulation are just, they're the reality of your daily scroll.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
Right. So we are going to attempt a massive upgrade of your mental software. The goal here is to make you immune or, at least highly resistant to deception by teaching you exactly how to spot the underlying errors in reasoning that people use to trick you.
And it is arguably probably the most critical survival skill for the modern era. We're pulling our insights today from a massive stack of notes drawn from Dr. Bo Bennett's extensive academic catalog, specifically focusing on the concepts mapped out in the text Logically Fallacious.
Which is a great resource.
It really is. It's essentially a comprehensive masterclass in the, hundreds of ways the human brain breaks down glitches or just gets hijacked during an argument.
And I want to set the tone right away for you. This is not about dry, formal logic equations drawn on a chalkboard somewhere. We're not doing abstract math here.
No, definitely not.
This is about the real-world arguments you hear every single day. This stuff coming from politicians on your television, from salespeople trying to close a deal, from your friends over dinner, and from the people you are endlessly arguing with in the comments section online.
We've all been there.
Right. We are looking at the architecture of everyday persuasion.
And my role here is to help synthesize all these concepts into a reliable, internal fallacy detector. We want to build that antivirus software for your mind so you can use it in real time to separate actual truth from structural manipulation.
Because once you see it...
Yeah, once you see the architecture of a bad argument, you can just never unsee it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can start identifying specific traps and glitches, we have to lay the foundation.
Yeah.
We have to define exactly what it is we're looking for.
Right.
Because I think a lot of people, they conflate having bad facts with having bad reasoning. And they are absolutely not the same thing.
They're really not. And that is the most crucial distinction to make right out of the gate. It's where most people get tripped up.
Okay.
A logical fallacy is an error in reasoning. It's a flaw in the process of how you connect idea A to idea B.
Good.
It is not a factual error. For something to be a logical fallacy, it has to be applied to an argument, and it has to be deceptive enough to fool an average adult. If there's no argument being made, or if the claim is just factually incorrect, you aren't dealing with a logical fallacy.
Let's play with that for a second to make sure the boundary's really clear.
Yeah.
If someone comes up to me and claims, hey, plane crashes kill more people every year than car crashes do, that is not a fallacy, right?
Exactly. Claiming that plane crashes kill more people than cars is just factually incorrect.
The data is just wrong.
The objective data proves otherwise. The reasoning isn't flawed, like the person isn't making a leap of logic. The data they hold in their head is just wrong. They have bad input.
Okay, that makes sense.
Likewise, if someone claims the sun is only 30 miles away from the Earth, they aren't committing a logical fallacy. They are just, factually completely lost.
Right.
The source material playfully notes that making a claim like that doesn't make the speaker fallacious. It just makes them a moron.
That's hilarious. So factual errors are just wrong data. Fallacies are wrong processes. The machinery itself is broken.
Spot on.
And we also need to separate fallacies from cognitive biases.
Right.
Because I hear those terms thrown around interchangeably constantly, especially in like corporate environments or on social media. People love to point and shout cognitive bias. Like they've just won an argument.
Oh, I see that all the time. They are related concepts. They often interact, but they are distinct mechanisms.
Okay.
Cognitive biases are unconscious patterns of thinking. They're internal, often evolutionary shortcuts your brain takes to save energy. Take the bandwagon effect, for example.
What's that one exactly?
That is the psychological tendency to believe things or do things just because, well, many other people believe or do them. We all have it. It kept our ancestors alive. If the whole tribe started running, you didn't stop to ask for data, you just ran too.
Right. You just move.
Exactly.
Right.
But having an internal bias doesn't mean you are committing a logical fallacy. A fallacy requires an external argument.
Wait, let me see if I have this right. If I unconsciously start wearing a certain style of very expensive, very uncomfortable shoe, purely because I see everyone else on my social feed wearing them, that is a bias. I haven't reasoned anything. I've just been swept up by the crowd.
Correct. Your brain took a shortcut.
But if I turn to my friend and say, you should definitely buy these incredibly uncomfortable shoes because literally everyone else is wearing them, which means they must be the best shoes on the market, now I've made an argument.
You've stated a premise and a conclusion.
Right. And because my conclusion doesn't logically follow from my premise, I have committed a fallacy.
Exactly. The bias is the internal weather, if you will. The fallacy is the external vehicle you build to try and drive someone else through it.
Wow, I love that analogy. Internal weather versus external vehicle.
And to break down that vehicle even further, fallacies generally fall into two broad categories, formal and informal.
Formal sounds incredibly rigid, like wearing a tuxedo to a debate club.
It kind of is. A formal fallacy is a structural flaw. The logic itself is fundamentally broken regardless of the subject matter you're discussing. You can strip away the words, replace them with algebra, and the math just won't work.
Can you give me an example?
Sure, the classic example is a categorical syllogism gone wrong. Imagine I set up an argument like this. All humans are mortal. Phil is mortal. Therefore, Phil is human.
I mean, it sounds right at first glance.
It does, because the brain likes the rhythm of it. But the structure is totally flawed because, well, Phil could be a groundhog.
Oh, right.
A groundhog is mortal, but it isn't human. The error is in the architecture of the statement itself. The premise does not guarantee the conclusion.
That's tricky. And an informal fallacy, which I assume is what we encounter most of the time in the wild.
Yes, overwhelmingly. An informal fallacy is a flaw in the content or the context of the argument. The structure of having a premise and a conclusion is technically there, but the content is completely irrelevant to establishing the truth of the claim.
So the math might look right, but the numbers are nonsense.
Exactly. If I say, Timmy is a poo-poo face, therefore Timmy's proposed changes to the local tax code are wrong, the structure of an argument exists. But the content, Timmy's alleged status as a poo-poo face, has absolutely zero logical bearing on macroeconomic policy.
Right. Okay, wait. I want to push back on this a little bit before we move on, because I'm thinking about the reality of how people communicate, and I'm thinking about tactics versus logic.
Okay, let's hear it.
If I am sitting on my couch watching television and a commercial comes on for an international charity, they don't show me a spreadsheet. They don't give me logistical data on how my dollar is distributed. They don't give me a reasoned argument about supply chains.
Right.
They just show me a heartbreaking 2-minute video of a starving child looking directly into the camera while sad music plays. Are they committing a logical fallacy? Because they aren't giving me reason, they're just giving me an emotional image.
That is a brilliant question. And it requires a very important distinction between fallacious reasoning and fallacious tactics.
Okay, break that down for me.
Fallacious reasoning is what the audience does when they are tricked. Fallacious tactics are the deliberate manipulation tools used by the arguer. In your charity example, the organization isn't lacking reason. Behind the scenes, they are actually using reason very effectively. They've studied the data and realized that a spreadsheet outlining their overhead costs won't get you to pick up the phone.
But an emotional image of a child will.
Exactly. They are deploying a highly effective persuasion technique.
So they aren't committing a fallacy by airing the commercial.
No, they're just trying to persuade you. It only becomes fallacious reasoning if you, the viewer, accept that emotional tactic as a logical premise.
Wow.
If you watch that commercial and conclude, because I feel an overwhelming sense of sadness looking at this child, this specific charity is objectively the most efficient and fiscally responsible organization to handle my donation, then you have committed a logical fallacy.
I see.
You have substituted an emotional response for empirical evidence.
Wow. So the charity is just providing the stimulus. I am the one committing the fallacy if I let my emotional reaction masquerade as a logical conclusion. That is entirely on me.
Precisely. Upgrading your mental software means taking responsibility for how you process the stimulus around you.
Man, that's heavy. So if the argument is the vehicle, what happens when someone decides to just abandon the vehicle entirely and attack the driver? Because it seems like, since humans are profoundly social creatures, when we can't defeat an argument intellectually, our deepest, most primal instinct is to just destroy the person making it.
Yeah, that instinct brings us to the most common and perhaps the most destructive family of fallacies, the attack on the person, or the ad hominem family.
Ad hominem.
It translates from Latin directly to against the man. It is the ultimate distraction technique. When you lack a logical counterpunch to an argument, you attack the source of the argument.
And there's several flavors of this, right? Let's start with the most basic ad hominem abusive. This is just straight up irrelevant personal attacks. Let's say a woman is at a city council meeting presenting a highly detailed, data-backed economic argument for lowering local property taxes. She has charts, she has historical precedents.
She's doing the work.
Right. And her opponent stands up, points at her, and says, "Why should we listen to a word you say? I know for a fact you eat a pint of Ben & Jerry's ice cream every single night."
Right, which is ridiculous. But what's fascinating here is not the insult itself, but how the audience's brain processes it.
How so?
The fact that the woman has an affinity for ice cream has absolutely zero logical connection to municipal tax policy. But human beings are status-driven animals.
Oh, wow.
By throwing in an irrelevant personal attack, the attacker isn't trying to dismantle her math. They are trying to diminish her social standing in the eyes of the audience. They are betting that if the audience respects her less as a person, they will unconsciously devalue her data.
It's an attempt to poison the well. That's sneaky. Then there is ad hominem circumstantial. This one is much trickier for me because it feels like common sense a lot of the time.
It does.
It's the assumption that someone's circumstances or their bias automatically invalidates their argument. Let's take the car salesman.
A classic example.
You walk onto a lot, and the salesman says, "This specific car is incredibly reliable." And to prove it, he hands you a massive stack of independent data from Consumer Reports. And you look at him and say, "I'm not listening to you. You just want the commission. You're just trying to sell me a car."
This is a perfect example because it highlights the friction between healthy skepticism and logical fallacy.
Because I should be skeptical, right?
Yes. The salesman has a vested financial interest in selling you the car. You absolutely should be aware of that circumstance. But, and this is the key, his vested interest does not magically alter the objective reality of the data he is handing you.
Oh, right. Because the Consumer Reports doesn't care about his commission.
Exactly. If he is providing verified, independent data from Consumer Reports, the argument for the car's reliability rests entirely on that data, not on his commission structure. Dismissing factual evidence purely because the person presenting it has a motive is the circumstantial ad hominem.
Because even a greedy person can hand you a true statistic.
Exactly. Motive dictates behavior, but motive does not dictate truth.
I love that. Motive does not dictate truth. Okay, then we have ad hominem guilt by association. I feel like this is the lifeblood of political discourse online right now.
It is rampant. And it's incredibly lazy thinking. The mechanism here is attempting to discredit an argument by pointing out that an unsavory person happens to agree with it.
The source material uses a very stark example to illustrate this. Pol Pot, the historical dictator, was vehemently against religion and was a horrific mass murderer.
Yes.
Frankie, a guy you know, is also against religion. Therefore, Frankie must be a terrible person with murderous tendencies.
It's connecting two completely unrelated dots just because they share one minor similarity in a Venn diagram. Sharing a single viewpoint with someone who is universally despised does not automatically transfer all of their negative traits to you.
Right.
If a dictator believes that the sky is blue, your belief that the sky is blue doesn't make you a dictator. The argument or the belief must be evaluated entirely on its own merits, completely divorced from whoever else might hold it.
Okay, here is one I am definitely guilty of. Ad hominem tu quoque.
The hypocrisy fallacy.
Tu quoque means you too, right? And the example is so relatable. Imagine you have a friend, Helga. Helga tells you, science unequivocally shows that eating fatty, greasy burgers drastically increases your risk of heart disease. You really shouldn't eat them.
Sounds like solid advice.
But she tells you this while taking a massive bite out of a triple bacon cheeseburger.
This is a powerful fallacy because it leverages our deep-seated social disgust for hypocrites. Nobody likes a hypocrite.
No one. My immediate instinct when Helga takes that bite is to laugh in her face, dismiss everything she just said, and order a burger for myself.
Of course. But structurally, her hypocrisy has absolutely no effect on the medical data she just cited.
I want to dig into an analogy on this that really struck me, because it moves from funny to tragic very quickly.
Go for it.
Imagine a father who is a severe chain smoker. He smokes 4 packs a day. His lungs are ruined. And he sits his teenage son down and says, never start smoking. It is a disgusting, addictive habit, and it will absolutely kill you.
Right.
The father eventually dies of lung cancer. Now, the dad was a total hypocrite. He was actively destroying his own body with cigarettes while telling his kid not to touch them.
But the dad's hypocrisy didn't make his argument about the dangers of cancer any less true. In fact, his hypocrisy was the tragic proof of his argument.
Exactly. If the son rejects the father's warning simply by saying, you're a hypocrite, so I'm not going to listen to you, the son is committing a tu quoque fallacy, and he is going to suffer the physical consequences of that bad logic. The truth value of a claim is completely independent of the behavior of the person making it.
That is the core takeaway. If we dismiss true warnings or valid data just because the messenger is flawed or hypocritical, we are the ones who ultimately pay the price. We blind ourselves to reality just to score a social point against a hypocrite.
Man, that's sobering. There is one more fallacy in this family that feels incredibly modern, almost defining our current cultural moment: bulverism.
Oh, bulverism is an insidious rhetorical trap. It was coined by C.S. Lewis, actually.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's the act of assuming someone is wrong based entirely on their identity or demographic, and then instead of addressing their argument, proceeding to explain why they hold that wrong belief based on that identity.
So it's a two-step bypass. First, assume they're wrong because of who they are. Second, psychoanalyze them.
Yeah.
Like saying, you only believe we should change the zoning laws because you are white. Or you're only taking that stance on the budget because you're a man.
Or even in a family dynamic.
Yeah.
You're only saying, I shouldn't take this job because you're my mother and you want to control me.
Right.
Bulverism bypasses the actual argument entirely and attacks the origin of the thought. It says, your demographic or your relationship to me makes you inherently biased, therefore everything you say is fundamentally invalid, and I don't even have to look at your evidence.
It is the ultimate conversation killer. Because how do you argue against your own identity? You can't.
You can't, which is exactly why the attacker uses it. It is an intellectual dead end designed to protect the attacker's worldview without having to do the hard work of actual debate.
It's so frustrating to experience.
It really is. If we step back and look at the bigger picture of the entire ad hominem family, they all stem from the exact same psychological desperation. When we're faced with a strong point that threatens our worldview and our brain realizes we don't have a logical counterpunch, our ego goes into survival mode. We abandon the idea and go for the throat of the person.
So if I'm listening to this and I want to apply it today, what does this mean for me?
It means that if you are in a debate, whether it's in a boardroom or at a Thanksgiving dinner table, and someone suddenly pivots from discussing the data to attacking you personally, your eating habits, your job, your demographic, your associations, you should take a deep breath and take it as a massive, glowing compliment.
A compliment. Wait, really?
Yes, it is a blinking neon sign that your actual argument is so structurally sound, they had to completely abandon logic and attack you instead. It means you won the intellectual argument.
I genuinely love that reframe. Thank you for insulting my sweater. It tells me my spreadsheet is absolutely flawless. But what if the person you're arguing with is a bit more sophisticated? What if they realize they can't attack you personally, maybe because you have a great reputation, but they still don't have the data to beat you? Where do they go next?
They bypass the brain entirely, and they aim straight for the heart. Let's talk about the emotional hijack.
Ooh, the emotional hijack.
Emotion is an incredibly powerful evolutionary lever. When we experience heightened emotional states, fear, anger, profound pity, The amygdala in our brain essentially overrides the prefrontal cortex, which is where our logical, critical thinking faculties reside. When emotion spikes, logic plummets.
Let's unpack the general appeal to emotion. This is substituting an emotional response for actual evidence.
Mm,
I want to paint a vivid picture based on a scenario we've seen play out in real life countless times.
go for it.
Imagine you're at a crowded town hall meeting. The town is voting on whether to spend millions of taxpayer dollars to tear down the local power lines and bury them underground. Now, no scientific data has been presented showing the lines are dangerous. The environmental reports say they're safe, but the opposition brings a young mother up to the microphone, and she is holding her little boy, who is currently undergoing treatment for cancer. And with tears in her eyes, she asks the crowd to tear down the lines so other kids won't get sick.
Wow. Yeah, it is an incredibly difficult, almost suffocating situation to be in. As a human being, anyone with a functioning heart feels deep, visceral empathy for that mother and that child. The emotional weight in that room would be crushing.
Absolutely crushing.
But empathy is not epidemiology.
If I'm sitting in that room, my instinct is to yell, tear them down immediately.
Of course it is. But structurally, if the town votes to tear down the power lines based solely on the plea of a sick child, without any verifiable data linking the electromagnetic fields of the lines to the illness, the town is substituting emotion for evidence.
They're reacting, not reasoning.
Right. They are making massive infrastructure and financial decisions based purely on feelings. They're trying to cure a tragedy with a fallacy.
And if you stand up and say, where is the data? You look like a monster.
Which is exactly why the appeal to emotion is so devastatingly effective as a tactic. It uses social pressure to enforce the emotional hijack.
That is terrifying. Then there is the appeal to fear. If pity is a scalpel, fear is a sledgehammer. And we see this constantly in macro politics and economics.
Wow, all the time.
Imagine a politician stepping up to a podium and declaring, if we don't immediately pass this multi-billion-dollar bailout for the automakers, the entire U.S. economy will completely collapse within 6 months. They state it as an absolute certainty, but they offer zero economic modeling or proof.
Fear creates what we call fraudulent urgency. It shuts down the critical evaluation of alternatives.
Fraudulent urgency, I like that.
When fear is the primary motivator deployed to get someone to accept a proposition, and it's not backed by probabilistic verifiable evidence, it's a structural fallacy. Notice the automaker example. It presents a terrifying, apocalyptic consequence, total economic collapse, as a guaranteed outcome to force immediate agreement.
It doesn't even let you ask questions.
Right. It bypasses the question of how the collapse would happen or if there are other ways to mitigate it. It just screams fire to make you run out the door they want you to run out of.
It happens on a micro level, too, like a mother telling her child that if he doesn't believe in a specific religious dogma, he will physically burn in an eternal lake of fire forever. It's using ultimate terror to enforce compliance without providing evidence for the premise.
Precisely. Terror is not a substitute for truth.
What about positive emotions? Does the brain get hijacked by feeling good, too? Like the appeal to flattery?
Absolutely. The mechanism is identical, just the neurochemistry is different. Think of a car salesman who sees you hesitating over the price of a sports car. Instead of lowering the price or talking about the engine specifications, he leans in and says, honestly, you look 10 years younger behind that wheel. That car was built for someone with your specific kind of presence.
Oh, man. He's trying to close the deal not based on the car's fuel efficiency or safety rating, but entirely on my vanity.
Exactly. He is injecting dopamine into your system to override your financial anxiety. It feels good, but it is a logical fallacy to buy a car because someone complimented your face.
It really is. And the appeal to pity, the classic university scenario. A student comes into a professor's office at the end of the semester and demands an A grade because she had to study while attending her grandmother's funeral, and she even passed up a life-saving heart transplant just to take the final exam.
The effort is tragic, and the commitment is astounding. But what is an academic grade? A grade is an objective measure of subject mastery. It's not a measure of personal suffering or life difficulty.
Right.
Modifying the objective measurement of knowledge based purely on pity completely invalidates the grading system.
Okay, here is where I want to push back, and push back hard. Because if I look at all these emotional appeals, fear, pity, flattery, I picture a massive, beautiful, intricately decorated layer of frosting on a cake that is entirely made of sawdust.
Sawdust cake, okay.
It looks incredibly appealing. It triggers all the right cravings. But when you actually bite into it, there is absolutely no substance. It's just dry dust. But are we supposed to just be emotionless robots? If I'm trying to persuade someone to do something good, is it wrong to care? Is it a fallacy to be passionate?
Not at all. That's a vital distinction, and I'm really glad you pushed back on that. We are not robots, and trying to communicate like a robot is a terrible way to move humans to action.
Right, nobody listens to a robot.
Exactly. Appealing to both the brain and the heart is actually the mark of a truly great, historically significant communicator. Think of the most inspiring leaders in history. They didn't just read spreadsheets, they used emotion masterfully.
So where's the line?
Emotion only becomes a logical fallacy when it is used as a substitute for evidence, rather than a supplement to it.
Substitute versus supplement.
Let's go back to the town hall meeting about the power lines. If you have a stack of peer-reviewed epidemiological data proving that the electromagnetic fields from those specific lines are causing a spike in local illnesses, and you bring the sick child to speak to the crowd, you are pairing sound logic with powerful emotion.
That makes sense.
You have the structural foundation, and you are using emotion to make people care about the data. That is persuasion at its absolute best. It is only a fallacy when the sawdust is hiding under the frosting. Data and empathy together are unstoppable.
Frosting an actual cake. I like that.
Ah.
But what happens when an argument lacks both data and emotional weight? Because emotions burn out. They take energy. And most of the time, our brains are just lazy.
Oh, totally.
We don't want to feel, and we definitely don't want to calculate. We want someone else to do the heavy lifting for us. We look around the room for the smartest person, or we look at the crowd, and we just outsource our reasoning.
Which opens the door to our next set of traps, the illusion of truth. This is what happens when we let authority, consensus, or tradition do our thinking for us.
It's an energy-saving mechanism, right?
Entirely. We simply cannot be experts in everything. If you had to personally verify the structural engineering of every bridge before you drove over it, you would never leave your driveway.
Never.
So we rely on heuristics, mental shortcuts. We trust authorities, we trust the consensus of the crowd, and we trust tradition. And 90% of the time, this keeps us alive and functioning.
Right.
But when we treat these shortcuts as absolute, unquestionable proof, we cross over into committing logical fallacies.
Let's start with the appeal to authority, or false authority. The idea that because an expert said it, it must be true. The source text highlights an interesting contrast here. It notes that deferring to Richard Dawkins, who is a world-renowned evolutionary biologist on the topic of evolutionary mechanics, is completely reasonable heuristic. He is a relevant expert operating within his specific domain.
Yes. But the fallacy occurs when we rip an authority figure out of their domain, or when we elevate someone to authority status without justification.
The text uses a very colorful example.
It does. Imagine deferring to an adult film star, let's call him Derek Schlongmeister, about the exact statistical size, macroeconomic impact, and year-over-year revenue of the U.S. adult film industry without him providing any actual market data.
Just because Derek is in the industry, people might assume he knows the macro data of the industry.
Exactly. Just because someone works on an assembly line doesn't mean they are qualified to dictate the global logistics of the supply chain. The fallacy of false authority happens when we let an irrelevant or unqualified authority add absolute credibility to a claim simply because they possess some level of fame or perceived authority in a tangentially related space.
We see this constantly with celebrities endorsing medical treatments or political candidates.
Mm-hmm.
A great actor is an authority on acting. They are not inherently an authority on geopolitical resource management.
Exactly. Then there is the appeal to common belief. The idea that if everyone thinks it, it must be true. It's the ultimate wisdom of the crowd's trap.
The history of human thought is littered with the wreckage of incredibly wrong common beliefs. The text points out that historically the vast majority of human beings on planet Earth believed the sun revolved around us. The consensus was nearly 100%.
It was still factually wrong.
Or consider the modern statistic that an estimated 75 million Americans believe in astrology, that the position of stars at your birth dictates your personality.
The sheer volume of people believing something gives it a false weight. Popularity does not dictate truth. Truth is not a democracy. You cannot vote a fact into existence. If 50 million people say a foolish thing, it is still a foolish thing.
Wow. And what about the appeal to tradition? The idea that we should keep doing something simply because we've always done it? The source gives two examples here that I want to dissect.
Okay.
One is a family tradition. A young man says, for 5 generations, the men in our family went to Stanford to become doctors, so I must go to Stanford to become a doctor too. The other is a broader cultural argument. Marriage has traditionally been defined as between one man and one woman.
Now, regarding those examples, It is very important we emphasize to the listener that we are analyzing the underlying structure of the argument here entirely impartially. We are not taking a moral, religious, or political stance on marriage, nor are we evaluating the prestige of Stanford. We are purely looking at how the logic flows.
Absolutely. Just to be completely clear, we're not taking a stance here, just looking at the logic.
Right. Structurally, arguing that something must remain a certain way or should be done a certain way solely because it has historically been done that way is a logical void.
Because it doesn't offer a reason, it just offers a history lesson.
Exactly. Tradition is essentially just peer pressure from dead people.
Peer pressure from dead people.
Yeah. It tells you what happened in the past, but it provides zero logical evidence for why it remains the optimal choice for the present or the future. If the young man wants to be a doctor because he loves medicine, great. But if he's only doing it because his great-grandfather did it, he is committing a fallacy.
It's terrible reasoning.
If tradition were absolute proof of correctness, humanity would never have invented the light bulb. We would have just stuck with candles because that's what we've always done.
Peer pressure from dead people.
Yeah.
That is brilliant. It makes you realize how much weight we give to ghosts.
Very true.
There's another authority fallacy that drives me absolutely crazy, and I hear it every day. Anonymous authority. It's the insidious use of the phrase, "they say that." Like, they say if you swallow chewing gum, it sits in your stomach and takes 7 years to digest.
They is arguably the most prolific, the most quoted, and the most inaccurate source in all of human history. Who is they? Is they a team of gastroenterologists at the Mayo Clinic? Or is they your Uncle Steve after 3 beers?
Right.
When an arguer fails to specify source, the audience cannot verify the credibility or the methodology of the claim. It is a cowardly way to fabricate or exaggerate facts while completely avoiding accountability. It creates the illusion of a consensus without having to prove one exists.
Okay, let's unpack this for the listener, because I'm putting myself in their shoes right now, and I'm feeling a little overwhelmed.
Understandable.
I'm thinking, okay, if I shouldn't trust authorities implicitly, and I shouldn't trust the majority of the crowd, and I shouldn't trust historical tradition, who or what do I trust? Do I literally have to research every single thing myself from scratch? Do I need to get a chemistry degree to know if my tap water is safe?
That is the ultimate paradox of living in an advanced, highly specialized information age. The text draws a very fine, crucial line here that we need to clarify. There is a massive difference between deferring to a relevant authority, which, as we discussed, is a necessary heuristic for daily survival, and committing the logical fallacy of appeal to authority.
So how do we walk that line?
If you go to a board-certified doctor and they swab your throat and diagnose you with strep throat, it is entirely reasonable, logical, and practical to defer to their relevant expertise and take the antibiotics. You do not need to buy a microscope, go home, and sequence the DNA of the bacteria yourself to avoid committing a fallacy.
I'm very relieved to hear that. So when does it become a fallacy?
The fallacy only occurs when you insist that a claim is absolutely, undeniably true solely because the expert said it, treating them as an infallible deity. It becomes a fallacy when you refuse to be open to the underlying evidence, or when you refuse to acknowledge that even experts can be wrong, or that consensus can shift as new data arrives.
So it's about being open.
Right. Healthy reasoning says, I accept this as highly probable because a relevant expert said it, but I recognize that the truth rests on the data they used, not on the lab coat they wear.
It is about provisional acceptance. I accept this for now, based on the probability of their expertise, but I don't treat it as dogmatic gospel. If new data arrives, I can change my mind.
Perfectly stated. We trust, but we remain open to verification.
Awesome. So we've talked about external pressures, social attacks, emotional manipulation, deferring to the crowd. But what about the calls coming from inside the house? What about the ways our brains are just fundamentally broken when it comes to processing reality? Let's shift into mathematical and logical blind spots.
This is where it gets really interesting.
Because sometimes our reasoning doesn't fail because someone tricked us. It fails because the human brain is inherently terrible at math.
It is a humbling reality to accept. Our brains did not evolve to process complex probability matrices, massive datasets, or long-term statistical trends. Our brains evolved to spot tigers moving in the tall grass, to find food, and to assess immediate social threats within a small tribe.
We are wired for narrative, not numbers.
We overwhelmingly prefer a simple, compelling story over a complex mathematical reality.
And that wiring creates blind spots.
Yeah.
The first one we need to look at is the base rate fallacy. This is when we ignore general, overarching statistics in favor of irrelevant, specific information.
Right.
The example from the text is a parent looking at college admissions. The parent believes their brilliant son will definitely get into an Ivy League university with a 6% acceptance rate, completely ignoring the fact that only brilliant kids apply to that school.
This is a classic cognitive blind spot where the narrative overrides the math. The parent looks at their son, sees that he gets straight A's, plays the cello, and volunteers. The parent has a very strong specific narrative, my son is exceptional. Therefore, they assume the general 6% overall acceptance rate doesn't apply to him because he's not an average applicant.
But what they are missing is the base rate of the specific population pool.
Right, because the other 94% who get rejected also play the cello and get straight A's. The base rate of brilliance in that specific applicant pool is already astronomically high. The parent is evaluating their son against the general population, not against the actual pool of competitors. They ignore the base rate and rely on their personal narrative.
The source also uses faith healing as a really powerful example of the base rate fallacy. Let's say someone attributes a miraculous cancer cure entirely to a faith healer touching them. What they're ignoring is the base rate of spontaneous remission in the general population.
This requires a very clinical look at causality. In medicine, certain types of cancers have a known rate of spontaneous remission, meaning the cancer disappears without any known medical intervention. Let's say, hypothetically, that rate is 1 in 10,000.
Okay.
Now, if a prominent faith healer tours the country and lays hands on 10,000 sick people, statistically, one of those people is going to experience spontaneous remission just based on the background mathematical base rate.
But the narrative is going to be the healer cured them.
Exactly. The healer takes credit for the statistical inevitability. The one person who gets better is paraded on stage, and the 9,999 who didn't are ignored. Without knowing and applying the base rate, you cannot determine true causality. You are just seeing the narrative you want to see.
Wow. Okay, what about the conjunction fallacy? This one trips people up constantly.
That's a great one.
The example here is fascinating. It's a thought experiment about a woman named Karen. We are given a prompt. Karen is a 30-something female who drives a minivan, lives in a quiet suburb, and wears mom jeans. Based on that description, is Karen more likely to be a woman or a mom?
When presented with this, the vast majority of people will instinctively answer mom. Why? Because the highly specific description, minivans, suburbs, mom jeans, perfectly fits the cultural stereotype and narrative of a mother.
Right. My brain immediately pictures a mom.
But mathematically, structurally, that answer is impossible. Think of it as a Venn diagram. The set of all women in the world is a massive circle. The set of all moms in the world is a smaller circle that exists entirely inside the circle of women.
Okay, I'm with you.
Every single mom is a woman, but not every woman is a mom. Therefore, the statistical probability that Karen is a woman is 100%, based on the prompt itself. The probability that she is a mom is something less than 100% because she could just be a woman who happens to like minivans.
That is wild. Our brain gets so hijacked by the colorful narrative details that we completely ignore the basic physical reality of how subsets work. A subset can never be more probable than the entire set.
Yes. The brain prefers the specific story over the broad probability.
I'm going to give you my own analogy for the base rate fallacy and these mathematical blind spots. Tell me if this works.
Let's hear it.
It is like looking at a large puddle in your driveway on a sunny day and immediately assuming it rained while entirely ignoring the fact that your sprinkler system has been running for the last hour.
That is a highly effective analogy. You are ignoring the most probable, immediate statistical reality, the mechanical sprinkler, in favor of jumping to a conclusion that completely ignores the base conditions of your environment, which is that the sky is clear.
Okay, here is another mathematical blind spot: appeal to coincidence. This is writing off statistically significant events as mere luck to avoid facing a difficult truth. Like Steve. Steve gets into 14 car accidents in a single year, and he tells everyone at the bar that he just has terrible luck. He claims the universe is out to get him.
At a certain point, the math dictates that the common denominator in all those accidents is Steve.
Yeah, Steve is the problem.
Exactly. To blame 14 distinct collisions on random cosmic chance is to defy statistical probability in favor of protecting one's own ego. The simplest, most mathematically sound explanation is that Steve is a terrible, distracted driver, but admitting that hurts his ego, so he blames luck.
Then we have an incredibly profound economic one: the broken window fallacy. The illusion that destruction is somehow a net benefit to society.
This is a classic from Frederick Bastiat.
Right, the French economist. The classic example goes like this. You accidentally throw a baseball through the front window of your father's shop. The window shatters. But you turn to your dad and say, actually, I just did the local economy a huge favor. Now you have to pay the glazier $50 to fix the window. The glazier now has $50 extra to spend at the butcher spends it at the baker, and I just stimulated the entire town's economy.
It sounds incredibly convincing until you realize what you are failing to see. Bastiat called this the fallacy of the seen versus the unseen.
What's the unseen part here?
What is seen is the mechanic or the glazier getting paid. You see the immediate flurry of economic activity to repair the damage. What is unseen is what your father would have spent that $50 on if the window hadn't been shattered.
Right. He might have bought a new suit, paying the tailor. He might have invested it in new inventory.
Exactly. Breaking the window didn't create new wealth. It merely diverted existing wealth from productive, expansive uses into purely restorative uses. If you bought a suit, society would have both a window and a suit. Because you broke it, society just has a window. Society as a whole is poorer by one intact window.
But people make this argument all the time today.
We see this fallacy constantly in modern times when people argue that catastrophic hurricanes or even wars are good for the economy because they create construction and manufacturing jobs. They are confusing the fever of rebuilding with actual economic health.
The text even cites an extreme historical example of this to show how dark this logic can get. Some people have argued that the Holocaust, while tragic, was functionally a good thing overall because it educated future generations about the horrors of genocide and forced the creation of international human rights laws.
And again, applying our objective structural analysis, we see the profound, almost grotesque failure of evaluating the seen versus the unseen. The arguer is overvaluing the seen, the historical lesson, and the subsequent treaties, and they are completely, catastrophically devaluing the unseen.
The unimaginable suffering.
Exactly. The millions of human lives extinguished, the generations of art, science, discovery, and joy that were violently erased from human potential. It is a catastrophic failure of reasoning, mistaking a horrific cost for a net benefit simply because the cost was forcibly paid.
It's sobering. It shows how clinical, detached logic, when misapplied or when it ignores the unseen ledger, can disguise horrific ethical blind spots.
Precisely. Which leads us to a crucial transition. It is one thing when our brains glitch accidentally. It is one thing when we naturally struggle with math or unseen variables. But what happens when someone knows about these glitches and actively exploits them?
It's the difference between tripping over a rock and someone deliberately pushing you into a pit. We are moving from accidental glitches to deliberate misdirection. Let's explore misdirection, traps, and sneaky tactics.
This is where we cross into the territory of active deception. These arguers aren't making mistakes, they are setting snares.
First up, cherry picking. We all instinctively know what this is, but the examples really highlight how deceptive it can be when done well.
Okay, let's hear them.
Imagine looking at a resume. The applicant highlights how hard they work, their incredible sales numbers, and their attention to detail. It looks flawless. What they deliberately suppress is the fact that they were fired from their last 3 jobs for constantly violating company privacy policies and harassing coworkers.
Right. Or consider a political candidate who proudly runs television ads advertising that they donate a full 10% of their income to local charity. It sounds incredibly noble.
And once again, maintaining total structural impartiality here.
Of course. What they intentionally leave out is that the charity is a front organization that funnels money to illicit services and drug rings.
It's lying by omission.
It is arguably more dangerous than a direct lie. Cherry picking is presenting the evidence that supports your claim while deliberately suppressing the exact evidence that destroys it. A half-truth is dangerous because it has the verifiable veneer of credibility. You can check their tax returns and see they did donate the 10%. The seen evidence checks out, so you stop looking for the unseen reality.
Next is the complex question, also known as the loaded question. I've noticed a tactic politicians and journalists use where they trap you before you even open your mouth. It's like a conversational ambush. If you answer the question at all, you lose. Is this what that is?
Yes. This is when an arguer hides an unproven claim inside a question, so that no matter how you answer, you are implicitly admitting to their premise.
What's the textbook example for that?
The classic textbook example is asking someone on the witness stand, how many times per day do you beat your wife?
Oh, wow. It's a brilliant, evil trap. If you shout, "None, I never beat my wife,"
The jury's brain still registers the embedded premise. They think, wow, he's very defensive about this wife-beating thing.
Exactly. The claim of abuse is smuggled into the discourse without the attacker having to provide a single shred of evidence for it. The burden of proof is bypassed entirely.
The text gives a much more common political example. How many school shootings should we tolerate before we finally change the gun laws?
And again, we must analyze this strictly, structurally, impartially, without taking any side on the actual debate over gun control. The fallacy in that specific question is the embedded, unproven premise that changing the gun laws will automatically and effectively decrease school shootings.
Right.
Whether that underlying premise is true or false is the actual matter for debate. But the loaded question bypasses the debate entirely and forces the listener to accept the premise just to engage with the emotional weight of the question. It forces you to say, we shouldn't tolerate any, which the arguer then twists to mean, therefore, you agree with my specific legislative proposal. It's verbal judo. Then we have alphabet soup and gibberish. This sounds funny, but it's so common in corporate America.
Oh, it really is.
It is deliberately confusing the audience with hyper-technical jargon to sound smart and intimidate opposition. The example is someone rattling off Toastmasters acronyms. I have my CC, my ACB, and my DTM to prove they are a great public speaker. Or, if you've seen the 80s movie Spies Like Us, Chevy Chase gets cornered by the press and just starts babbling absolute clinical-sounding nonsense to avoid answering the question.
When an arguer uses an impenetrable wall of technical jargon or just spews a highly educated-sounding word salad, they are weaponizing the audience's insecurity. They are betting on the fact that most people will not raise their hand in a crowded room and say, I have absolutely no idea what you just said.
Because people are terrified of looking stupid.
Exactly. So they will just nod along, assume the speaker is a genius, and agree. It is a smokescreen masking a total lack of substance.
Okay, this next tactic is arguably the most relevant one for anyone listening right now who owns a smartphone. Deceptive sharing. This is a modern algorithm-driven fallacy. It happens constantly on social media.
Constantly.
It's when someone shares a statistically incredibly rare event, like a perfectly healthy child experiencing a severe complication from a routine vaccine, or a high school athlete dropping dead in gym class from a freak heart condition. And they share it in a way that implies this is a common, everyday, pervasive threat.
And once again, maintaining total structural impartiality regarding the actual medical protocols, the logical fallacy lies in the deliberate manipulation of your risk perception. The specific cognitive glitch being exploited here is called the availability heuristic.
I really want to spend time on this. What exactly is the availability heuristic?
Our brains evolved to judge the frequency and likelihood of an event by how easily we can recall examples of it from our memory. If a caveman remembers 3 people getting eaten by lions near the river, his brain says, the river is highly dangerous. That is a good heuristic.
Sure, that keeps you alive.
But today, you are connected to the entire globe. In a country of 330 million people, a 1 in a million medical anomaly is going to happen 330 times this year.
So it's rare, but it absolutely exists.
Yes. But if an arguer or an algorithm takes those 330 rare, terrifying events and curates them into your personal daily feed, your availability heuristic is hijacked. You see 10 videos in a row of people collapsing.
Oh, man.
Your brain doesn't do the math. Your brain says, I can recall 10 examples of this instantly, therefore this is happening everywhere to everyone. You perceive a statistical anomaly as a pervasive, imminent threat.
And the most insidious part is, the person sharing the video doesn't even have to make an explicit argument. They don't have to type out vaccines are bad or whatever. They just share the video of the anomaly with a wide-eyed emoji. The sheer act of curation is the deceptive tactic.
It is brilliant and it is destructive. It breaks our ability to assess true risk.
So, if I'm synthesizing this correctly, your social media feed is essentially a custom-built, multi-billion-dollar fallacy engine designed specifically to hijack your availability heuristic and keep you terrified so you keep scrolling.
That is a clinically accurate, if deeply disturbing, summary of the modern digital ecosystem.
Wow. Which brings us to our final deep dive segment. We've looked at misdirection, we've looked at emotional hijacking, but what about an argument that doesn't misdirect you but traps you in a closed loop, like a maze with no exit?
Ah, yes.
We are looking at the most absurd, yet surprisingly common, forms of flawed logic at play. Arguments that eat their own tails. Circular reasoning Or begging the question?
This happens when the conclusion of an argument is just assumed in the premise. The argument doesn't actually go anywhere. It provides no external evidence. It just runs in a tight little circle.
The examples are great for this. Imagine a marketing campaign. The reason everyone wants the new Slap Me Silly Elmo doll is because it is the hottest toy of the season.
Yeah. Think carefully about the architecture of what is actually being said there. Being the hottest toy and everyone wanting it are the exact same concept. The sentence is functionally saying, everyone wants the toy because everyone wants the toy.
Right.
No actual external reason for its popularity, like its innovative design, its massive marketing budget, or its low price point is provided. It is an empty loop.
Or the famous line from the comedy movie Idiocracy. The characters are watering their crops with a sports drink called Brondo, and the crops are dying. Someone asks, why do they use electrolytes to make Brondo? And the answer is, because Brondo's got electrolytes.
It is hilarious in a comedy, but we accept it in serious contexts all the time. Look at the religious example highlighted in the text. The Bible is the infallible word of God because God tells us it is right here in the Bible. The premise requires you to already accept the conclusion before you can accept the premise.
And circular definition. Like defining a fictional creature, a flippity-flu, simply as being smarter than a floppity-flip. And then, when asked what a floppity-flip is, defining it as dumber than a flippity-flu. You've spoken a lot of words, but you haven't actually learned what either of them are.
It's linguistic sleight of hand.
I want to borrow the analogy directly from the text for this because it's so good. Falling for circular reasoning is exactly like getting an email from a Nigerian prince asking you to wire him $50,000. And you decide you can completely trust him because the very last line of his email says, I assure you this is a legitimate request.
That is the perfect analogy. And the reason our highly evolved brains fall for this is fascinating.
Why do we fall for it?
We usually fall for circular reasoning because the words used in the premise and the words used in the conclusion are just different enough that our brain doesn't immediately recognize they mean the exact same thing.
It's linguistic camouflage.
Exactly. The camouflage hides the logical loop. If the scammer wrote, this is legitimate because this is legitimate, our brain would catch the repetition and delete the email instantly.
Sure.
But because they say, you can trust me because I assure you, our brain parses the different vocabulary, expends energy processing the syntax, and completely misses the fact that the underlying logic is entirely empty.
That is wild. Our brains are so smart and so focused on processing language that they essentially trick themselves out of doing the math.
Okay, let's take a deep breath and zoom out. We have covered a massive amount of cognitive ground today.
We really have. We have built quite the mental toolkit.
We started by separating facts from reasoning, understanding that you can have bad data, but that's different from having a broken process. We unpacked how our primal brain's trying to attack the person instead of the argument with the ad hominem family, from insulting ice cream habits to pointing out hypocrisy.
We looked at how emotional hijacking fear, pity, flattery can completely bypass our prefrontal cortex. We dismantled the illusions of outsourcing our thinking to false authority, common belief, and the peer pressure of dead people we call tradition.
That was a big one.
We exposed our inherent mathematical blind spots, like the base rate fallacy and the broken window. We shined a harsh light on deliberate, sneaky tactics like cherry-picking, loaded questions, and how algorithms weaponize our availability heuristic through deceptive sharing. And finally, we chased arguments that eat their own tails in circular reasoning.
It is a lot to process. But you, the listener, are now armed with a robust mental shield against deceptive information. You have the antivirus software installed. But before we sign off, I want to leave you with a final, somewhat provocative challenge based on everything we've explored today.
Lay it on us. I think we're ready.
It is incredibly easy and, frankly, deeply satisfying to spot these fallacies in the people you disagree with. It feels great to point out the circular reasoning or the ad hominems in the political party you vote against or the media figures you already dislike.
Yeah, we all love doing that.
But true critical thinking, the real software upgrade, requires you to look inward. I want you to take your most deeply held fundamental belief. It could be a political stance, it could be a religious dogma, it could be a personal philosophy about how the world works.
Okay.
Now, apply the tools we just learned to yourself. Strip away all the appeals to tradition. Strip away all the comfort of the appeal to popular belief. Strip away the emotional safety blankets and your reliance on authority figures. Once you strip all of that scaffolding away, is your core belief still standing on a solid foundation of objective, verifiable evidence? Or is it resting entirely on a hidden web of logical fallacies that you've simply never dared to question?
Wow, that is a heavy but absolutely necessary question to mull over. It is uncomfortable. But as we've learned today, that discomfort means your mental software is actually updating. It means you are thinking, not just reacting. So to you listening, keep questioning, keep learning, and enjoy applying your shiny new fallacy detector to the chaotic world around you. Because out there in the incredibly murky waters of human communication, your own critically thinking mind is the only true navigation system you have. Try to keep the virus out. We will catch you on the next Deep Dive.